I'm thrilled to have Jeremy Rule joining us on TIDES. With over 2 decades of leadership experience at top companies like GitHub, Amazon, and Microsoft, Jeremy has been at the forefront of transforming how organizations leverage technology to drive innovation. His work in bringing game-changing AI products to the market, such as GitHub Copilot, and his leadership in building high-performing agile teams make him a true visionary in the tech industry. Jeremy's unique perspective on the intersection of AI, IT, and workforce, along with his passion for talent and leadership, promises to offer valuable insights for companies navigating this evolving digital landscape. Welcome, Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Shveta. And it's exciting to be here. And it's fun to see what your company's doing with kind of the interaction between human and AI in the future and technology. So really thrilled to have this discussion.
Fantastic. Jeremy, I've been noticing that AI is rapidly transforming product development, and we see it in the product suites that we use every day at work. From your perspective, how is AI reshaping this space, and what are the key opportunities to accelerate the development process?
Well, that's a great question. I think everybody's had their AI moment, whether it's the first time they used ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot, or maybe they just saw, a booster caught by reinforcement learning with one of Elon Musk's companies. Like, there's been moments that we've all seen over the last couple of years, and we realize, AI is upon us, and it's not going away, and it's changing everything, and we either feel it or we know it or we've seen it. So to your question, like, how is that accelerating things? I'm more of a practitioner than a prognosticator. So I'm not a future seer, but where I see it touching things, it's very apparent. So with when I was at GitHub, we saw a number of companies adopt Copilot and GitHub Copilot and just see their development productivity accelerate in fantastic ways. Now I'm at, we're actually building a dating app. I'm in a company called TruDate, and we're using AI in ways that couldn't even be imagined in the last few days. So I think it's really important that we be practitioners of these technologies and not just watch and see like, hey, what's happening around us. It's really important to kind of get our hands dirty and see what they can do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as you're building your new product, the dating app, are you seeing more and more use of AI and AI augmentation by technical roles in your team? Where I'm going with this is I'm curious to know, as people start using more AI in their day-to-day work, how is their job, their roles being impacted, especially in the tech space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've encouraged people across the company, so not just the programmers, but everybody in every role to embrace it and to figure out how it impacts them. So, for example, we have a weekly stand-up meeting right now where we call it AI Weekly. Mm-hmm. And that's, we have developers, we have product people, we have people in executive roles that join this meeting, and they can bring an idea forth. One of the ideas, for example, was, hey, let's say two people in this dating app again match in the same zip code. Maybe the AI could suggest a date for them. Hey, there's a restaurant here, or there's a some event that might be interesting. Again, just to coach or help, but not to take over. So that's an idea that somebody in the company came up with. And so the AI Weekly, we sit down and figure out, like, how hard would that be to do? And for the technology people, they say, hey, wow, we've already got geolocation for our users. We know where they're at. We know we have a database where we can go find, potential areas for them to meet. So that's pretty low hanging fruit. Like, we could actually do that. We could probably do that sprint in a couple weeks. And then there's other ideas that are bigger and grander. Let's say somebody uploads a photo to their dating app profile, and that that photo has a bunch of other people that you don't maybe want in the photo, and it's got a bad background and maybe it doesn't kind of show your best self. So maybe somebody in product who's not even in technology says, hey, maybe we could help people when they upload a photo and say, this may be a better photo. So that would use DALL-E or some sort of image editing AI. So again, I think it's getting everybody involved, not just hardcore developers that live and breathe the code every day, but everybody from product to marketing to executive roles to QA to customer facing roles. Getting everybody involved in that discussion.
Absolutely. And coming back to GitHub, one of the things that I realized when Copilot GitHub first came out was this research that came out that because it was able to do coding and a little bit of programming, it did introduce productivity benefits for people who were true programmers. Are you seeing programmers and tech teams adopt technologies like GitHub to do their jobs differently? Or are you sensing there's still resistance and fear in adoption of tools to do and augment day-to-day workflow and jobs?
Yeah, I haven't seen much resistance and fear. It's, well, let me rephrase that. John Carmack, who famously wrote Doom and Quake and these video games in the 90s and early 2000s, he was asked on Twitter, maybe a year ago, I'm guessing a little bit, but he was asked on Twitter by a computer science student, hey, should I still be studying software engineering because apparently AI is going to do everything. And I thought John Carmack's response was really brilliant. I'll paraphrase it a little bit, but he said, it's really about problem solving. Coding was never the end goal. It's really about interpreting what you need to do for a customer, a client, your company, and being that creative problem solver. And the technology is going to get better and better and better, as we've seen with the rapid acceleration of AI. But that problem solving is still very much needed. And I find that to be true. And in our own company, we have people that use GitHub Copilot. And it's not just to say, hey, go write me this code. But for somebody like myself who's a little bit further removed from the code writing, I can select a piece of the code and say to Copilot, what does this code do? And it explains to me. Oh, okay, that's what that code does. Okay, I got it. Thank you. That's helpful. And then there's more along the whole stacks from just not just writing code, but how do you deploy it? How do you check it for security? How do you make it multi-regional? How do you make it so that it scales well? There's bigger problems. Or what is this? Somebody's doing uploading some code into your repository. Is this sound code that passes all the tests and we should move in? So a pull request, as they would call it in GitHub. But all of that periphery around just simply writing code, I think that's really the future there, and that the AI can be an accelerant too.
So if we put routine coding or coding as a routine task that programmers have to do in that bucket, and we make an assumption that AI can easily take over those routine tasks, do you see new roles emerging for tech talent where they will be applying themselves for problem solving and ideation? So what kind of roles can we think about emerging in the tech space specifically as the routine pieces of work are taken over by AI?
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, I'm more of a practitioner than a prognosticator, so I fully expect to be wrong on some of these things. But I do remember when my first computing job when I was at university in the mid-90s was, they called me a systems analyst. And I didn't know what that was. It sounded kind of weird. But it wasn't, they didn't call me a programmer or a software engineer or anything like that. But what I realized even back then in the mid-90s was they needed somebody to go to the business. In this case, I was working with some machine tool vendors, some people that created equipment that maintained the university and other places. They needed somebody that could take the requirements from that these people that knew how to work really heavy equipment and maintenance it and knew what those things needed and put that into software.
Mm-hmm.
And we called it a preventative maintenance system. And so to me, I didn't know it at the time, but a system analyst was to go and take those requirements and then translate that into what software, the magic of software could do for them, to keep a calendar for them, to keep, instructions. And we'd use all these barcoding and all kinds of stuff like that. So I think, back to that John Carmack quote where he's saying, hey, problem solving is the core skill. Translating business requirements to, what software can do as magic is still a skill. I would still say though that there's a hands-on component to this. It's no accident that GitHub calls it Copilot and that Microsoft adopted that Copilot across their product suite. I hear they're changing it now, but that Copilot term really says that no, we're not just turning it over to the machine to go make willy-nilly decisions, but you as the human that has responsibility and authority over this, has a voice in this, has a strong voice in it. So I really do like that Copilot term because it says it's not just the AI making decisions, but you, the human, along with the AI, are kind of working in tangent to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And so how does that translate to, to your question about, future roles and skills? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I think there's an analyst component to it. I think there's a creativity component to it. I think there's, just that human interaction component to it. But I guess we'll see as we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's such a fascinating time that we are living through because for this change, at least from my perspective, there's no end state defined yet. So it becomes really hard for us to figure out that's the skill that I'm looking for, or that's the future of job that we need to start planning and preparing our talent for. So and I know that you've done a lot of work from tech recruitment on that side as well. So from your perspective, given how AI is impacting the tech space, are you recruiting differently? Have your approach to looking at talent and recruitment changed in last couple of years since, let's say, Copilot and tools like that came into being?
Yeah, Shveta, that I appreciate that teeing that up. I have been a very prolific hiring manager. I hired a lot of people at Microsoft and then a whole lot of people at AWS because I was what they called a bar raiser, which was like this special recruiting role. And then I had the honor and opportunity at GitHub to also kind of build out a bunch of organizations there. Philosophically, I adopt what I guess would be the AWS kind of or Amazon principles of hiring for leadership principle fit along with functional fit and kind of balancing those two. I think as we see AI emerge, you really want to see passion. Like what is this? What can this thing do for us? What problems can it solve? Are we thinking big? Amazon had famously these leadership principles. One of them was think big. And when I think about AI, that squarely falls into the think big leadership principle. So looking at people that aren't kind of sitting on the sidelines, if you will, and just kind of waiting to see like, hey, what's going to happen with this AI and what's going to happen with the industry and where can I find maybe a little place to play in there. But I really do enjoy when somebody has some big ideas and says, let's go do this thing in a big way. I mean, you look at some of the famous AI products now. One of them, like Amazon Go stores, where you can go in there and there's no checker. You just go grab your stuff, put it in a bag, and you leave. That's driven by all these amazing kind of cameras and AI systems. One of the projects that I was on, or led when I was at AWS was we at Amazon, we had an issue where somebody could order from Amazon.com some items that shouldn't be in the same box. So if you can imagine ordering a candy bar and some bleach for your laundry and some chlorine for your hot tub, mm-hmm. Not a good idea to put all those in the same box because candy bar is going to taste bad. the bleach and chlorine are super dangerous together if it should spill. And it's just bad news all around if something goes wrong. So we were brought on to make sure that those dangerous goods, if you could call them that, were put in separate boxes. Now, and it uses computer vision and all these great things to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's just like an example of taking something that's a real problem with the technologies that are available right now that use AI, marrying them together and actually getting it done. So if I'm in the hiring manager role and I see somebody that shows that capacity to do that, so they have a functional fit, but they also have those leadership principles, that think big, that approach, and we can marry those together, that's pretty powerful, and that person, if they have the passion to go do that, it's a real game changer. Because you can imagine if you don't have that, then I guess there's somebody just trying to separate the bleach and chlorine and candy bar, and that's a little less efficient.
Yeah,
it's a weird story, but hopefully that covers.
No, absolutely. You make a great point. And if we look at the future talent who is big picture thinking, curious, creates ideas, can take risks, what does it mean for leaders? Like, I'm thinking about, how the fact that AI is on the rise, and I'm curious to know how AI has changed the way leaders manage, especially in product development team context. What leadership strategies have you found most effective for driving innovation in this new environment?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for you, because I don't know that we've seen that. In the fullness of time, we'll probably see that. We'll probably see those attributes come out from people. I know, like one of the efforts at GitHub that we had was to, understand our customers better. Mm-hmm. I was in our customer success organization, so we wanted to know, if we provided some consulting to a company, or if we provided some, customer success resources to a company, or we provided support to a company, what was the impact of that? And, the olden way of doing that would be you would, have a CRM tool and you have a spreadsheet, and you would hire an analyst and they would slice and dice that every day. And you would hopefully come up with some model that told you, hey, this is, our best ROI for this type of work. I think a newer and more AI kind of driven way would be to look at that through, can we create a large language model that you can ask questions to, and you can say, hey, if I do 10 support cases with this customer, and I do a professional services engagement, and I provide a customer success event with them, what does that do to their net retention rate and their growth rate and their adoption rate and that sort of thing? So asking more complex questions, then you can make better business decisions. So I do think for leaders, if you can not just have data sitting in spreadsheets and Salesforce reports and Tableau reports, just sitting out there in the ether, and you hope you're looking at the right things and making the right decisions off those things, but you have a little bit of more smarts, from the AI tools available to you, you're probably going to make better decisions. And that goes, I'm just talking about customer success at this point, but that goes, I think, across a lot of things, from marketing to engineering to everything else. So I think leaders should be lean in a little bit more, and not just say, well, I have my leadership team, my executive admin, and my data person, my biz ops person. So I assume they'll tell me all the right things, and then I'll use my brilliant brain to make right decisions. But instead, lean in a little bit more and say, can the AI help me make an even more informed decision here? Because ultimately, that's what you're doing. You're making decisions based on budget and people and direction of the company and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm also noticing a lot of work being done in the space of people and people data as well, because traditionally, from a people leader perspective, sometimes our hands were tied to support and motivate our team members appropriately, because most of our time if we are sitting in the business, is going solving business problems. There's only this much time to support our teams. But in the time and age that we are living in today, I think leaders, when they have right people data at their fingertips, they can coach, mentor, and support their teams appropriately as well. But I'm not sure if every organization has access to the richness of people data for supporting leaders so that they can support their team members.
Yeah, Shveta, you raise a great point. And I don't know, every company that I've been at, and majority of 3 big companies, but they have various, stages of maturity and how they keep track of that people data. And it seems to go in seasons. Like at one moment, it's super important to have that, individual development plan and that coaching plan in that, manager kind of purview over their performance. And it's very thoughtful and organized. And then other moments, it's not that. And it's, how do we catch up on it, and how do we start something new, and how do we keep track of that? And I've always thought, it's a complex subject. It's not easy, right? To know what to keep track of and the right things to keep track of. So it will be interesting to see if, AI can play a hand in that, like a positive hand in that, a positive, part of that. Some of the best, people tools, if you will, that I've seen have been really, really basic. Like, hey, what are your superpowers? Do you get to use them every day?
Mm.
If you don't get to use them, what could you do to get into a role or position or some experience that you get to use those every day? So some of those things are just like basic, manager to employee discussions that, if those take place, then how do you network those? And it was always interesting to me. I've been in some really good systems like Microsoft. They had something like I think they called it the Career Advisory Board, and I'm reaching back years ago, where people would come and present like, this is what I do every day. This is what I would like to do. Here's where I think the gaps are. Here's where I need sponsorship. And those were really good discussions. And to this day, I still remember people presenting those and then going back to them in 6 months after helping them and seeing them in just thrive and grow. Mm-hmm. But it takes intention, it takes time, it takes expense. Like you really have to pour into that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm off-roading a little bit, but it's area of passion if you can't tell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to just zoom into one thing that you said, which has piqued my curiosity now. When you talked about AI potentially being something that we can use to augment that experience between leaders and their staff, if we have to imagine a system that would have helped you as a people leader, what kind of support or what kind of experience would you have liked to have that we can potentially make today with the help of AI that will really enhance your relationship with your direct reports?
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to maybe not that long ago, probably this year, when I was at GitHub in a senior leadership position. I had one of the organizations that was under me was the partner team. So they worked with partners to help them adopt GitHub, to do go-to-market activities, to do reseller, all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of half sales, half account management. It's kind of a blend. It's a partner thing's kind of unique to itself. And then and maybe he'll see this podcast, but this young guy, younger in career, who's one of our all-stars, was in our business operations. And he was, so the partner team was under me. The business operations was not under my organization. But I had heard from his leadership that he was looking for something new and different to try. He had big aspirations in his career, just crushing at it, his job as business operations, really evolving the data and how we see it and our monthly rhythm of the business and so on. So there was nothing other than me talking to the business operations leader. There was nothing that told me that he actually was quite interested in getting partner experience. I didn't know that. I just happened to have a conversation, a one-on-one with the business operations leader. She said, hey, so-and-so is interested in the partner roles and some of the ones you have open. And I said, well, he's one of our all-stars. We should keep him happy and busy. And if that grows his career and that gives him some new skills, that'd be great. But imagine if we hadn't had that discussion, right? We never chatted. That transition, so to the end of the story, he eventually moved into the partner role and certainly has accelerated his career. But if we hadn't had that conversation, the business leader with the biz ops leader, that we might not have been able to facilitate that move. So I do wonder if there's a way that AI could help, and I'm just using this as an example, but could help, facilitate those sorts of moves, or maybe look around corners. That's what AI is very good at. Look around corners that we don't look around.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this person would be great at partner, but we didn't know that. The AI could kind of see like, hey, you should, I don't know, I'm thinking kind of science fiction here. But the AI might be able to make some suggestions and do things that maybe weren't apparent to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And traditionally, this is where HR has had a bigger role to play, because employees typically talk to their managers, talk to HR, and then there's a long cycle of making things happen. And sometimes if you're not advocating for yourself as an employee, it's a missed opportunity because nobody knows what your aspirations were. So you don't get the right support. But I'm just curious to know, what has your partnership in your roles as people leader been like in the past, and how do you see that, or what's your expectation for that partnership going forward, now that, assume, HR also has their own tech stack and they have the right tools to support the rest of the organization?
So the partnership with HR specifically, I mean, it's interesting. HR, I've seen kind of evolve over time. Everybody's had to get a little bit leaner and meaner. So, if I were to reach back 15 or 16 years, I would have an HR partner that was fully dedicated to my organization and handling every little discussion. And we were meeting maybe twice a week. And that seems to, in my estimation, change to, almost an on-call function where there's a pool of HR people that we reach into to do one-off challenges with, and then there's maybe if we're doing performance evaluations, they come in kind of for that event and then disappear. So I feel like that relationship has changed over time, and I'm not coming from the HR side, so maybe it was just the circumstances I've in. But I see you nodding, so maybe that's the new reality. So that relationship, though, it's interesting because in HR just covers a lot of, or it covers so much area. So there's both kind of incidents that you deal with, but then there's the recruiting function, there's the talent development, there's there's a lot of functions that HR plays. I do think that a strong partnership with HR has always been kind of a cornerstone of how I've always operated as a business leader, because I know that a lot of times if I have that strong partnership with HR, that they uncover blind spots that I'm not seeing in my organization. That frequently happens. And that's super helpful. And our in a knowledge worker kind of environment, which is what IT is, a lot of times your ability to succeed is only as good as the people you have and how they're thriving and doing well. And then if you have really troublesome spots, then that kind of, brings down the whole system. So I certainly have a great appreciation for HR. I'll tell you something, Shveta, that's I don't think I've ever shared this, but it's kind of interesting to me. When we were doing these, I don't know, they'd probably not call them personality tests, but these our whole organization went through this thing, but it was by the Gallup poll. I think there was a book called the Trombone Player, and it was to figure out like what are you really passionate about and what would you really be good at. And so I, along with everybody in my organization, took this test to see like what would you be, what would you really thrive at? And I fancied myself as like an engineer that was a little out of touch with engineering and sales and consulting. And the test came back and it said that I would be good at organizational leadership / HR. And I thought, wow, really? That's not how I ever pictured myself. And then when I thought about it more, it was, as you lead bigger organizations, more and more people, it is about that people connection and getting the best out of people and driving for the superpowers. And I worked for a lady named Kathleen Hogan. I think she's the chief people officer or something at Microsoft now. She's a big shot there. But one of the things I learned about her is she ran professional services or enterprise services, they called it there at Microsoft, but then went into an HR role and led. I think she followed Lisa Brummel to run HR at Microsoft. So I don't think that business and HR sit on two sides of the firewall and they're separated and one has one skill and one has the other and never the two shall meet. And I don't think that. Like these really strong leaders that I saw in very senior roles showed me that actually HR and senior leader business leadership are very similar. And they have fungible skills that I didn't understand that before. So again, off-roading, but
yeah. No, you make a really good point, Jeremy, because having lived in HR, on the periphery of HR and in the business, I feel like HR, if their superpower is people and relationships, then the tech team or people in IT or people who are tech savvy, their superpower is right now leveraging technology to solve for business and people problems. So this is where I'm curious, especially from your perspective. Like I can understand the HR perspective, having lived in that space, but from business perspective, the change is not going away. I mean, the pace of change that we are experiencing is like unprecedented. We haven't experienced it before. And it doesn't seem like it's going to slow down. And there's a big human aspect to this change and transformation as well. It's not just implementing a new piece of technology into an organizational environment. People have to rethink how they contribute and add value to an organizational environment. This is where, from your perspective, sitting in the business, I'm really curious to know if we have to strike that partnership between HR and tech leadership and tech teams. What could that look like in the future? And do you see that there should be a partnership, a strategic partnership between the two areas of business?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. Yeah, I'm thinking about, I've had an executive administrator for much of my career, which is a real luxury to have. And with Microsoft Teams, which is at the dating app company that I'm working at, we have Teams. So that's what they use for their thing. And the EA in the past, would send out notes on the meeting. And they were, really, some of them are really good at it. They capture here's the 5 things you need to take away from this meeting. Here's our actions. Here's our go-dos. And now with Teams, to be honest, it does it for you. It captures the summary, the actions. It just does a good job of that. So in my mind, the EA in this example can take that time that would normally be used to capture, here's the actions and the items from the meeting, and use that time for something else. Which is there's always plenty to do. So I'm thinking to your question, like, what does HR in the business, fall into that? HR in the business, when we're making a hire or we're upskilling somebody or training somebody or we're thinking about people development, it's not about writing better notes for a meeting, right? That ship has sailed. We just saw, I take that one and go. So I do think there's opportunity to say, well, hey, our data team could use some help here, and maybe there's higher value that you could add with this function. So I'm using that as just like a tiny example, but I think you could talk about those kinds of examples across the board. Where are the higher value, more impact, quicker time to market, where are those items? And then if HR and the business are kind of working hand in hand, thinking about that and saying, well, where do we want to be in a year or 18 months in our quarterly planning, our semester planning, however we do that? And then what are the things that people can do to both, help the business, but also grow their careers, that are very cognizant of the changes upon us, instead of just kind of looking at the old scorecard, which is easy to do. In consulting, we have a scorecard that, if you look across every practice I've ever managed, it looks the same. You have customer satisfaction, you have utilization, that's how much the consultant is billing, and you have renewal rate, and you have, you just have the exact same scorecard everywhere. If we just, if HR and the business just sits there together and says, well, let's look at this scorecard, and this person gets a nice reward and this person gets a lesser reward, and we don't say, well, this person took a risk to go evolve the business and do new things that we haven't done before, then we're probably missing, and we're probably going to get passed up by a competitor, to be real dramatic about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, having kind of a more forward-looking view on the business and not just measuring what we always measured, like, oh, this administrative assistant took notes better than the other person. We missed out, right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that traditional practices of HR might not be as relevant today, given the changing nature of what's happening in the business, the way we hire, the way we develop, retain, incentivize, motivate, give bonus, and pay structures. Compensation is going to go through significant shifts to meet the needs and demands of what the organizations need today and tomorrow, which is unknown. But in that situation, again, because you play heavily in the tech space and you represent business in this conversation that we are having today, if an HR leader comes to you and your team today saying that we hear you, we agree with whatever you're saying, we want to make it possible, but our hands are tied because our HR technologies are not ready to support. Can we partner to build something in-house? Would you and your team be willing to partner with HR? Like, what would that look like? Is that even on the table as something that businesses can explore or should explore going forward? Tap into internal tech capabilities to build something that's bespoke to the organizational culture? Or should HR, from your perspective, be looking externally because businesses just don't have time, even though they have the capability to solve these problems internally?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of that build the airplane while we fly it a model that sounds good but is impossible to happen. I would kind of take a big, if an HR business partner came to me and talked about that, I would take like a big step back, because I've seen this at many companies. One is, I would say, well, what is our leadership principles? And I know that's taking a way big step back, but at this small startup that I'm working with, the dating app company, I said, what are our leadership principles? They said, we don't have any. I said, well, how are you making decisions? Well, we just basically fight, and whoever wins the fight, that's how we made the decision. So first, we start with those leadership principles and make sure that those are in place. And I'll give you a very brief history, but I think it's important. One is, my first job out of college was a company called Enron. And I know most people today don't know what that is, but Enron was infamous for, being a bit of a problem company that ultimately ended its executives in jail. And we have things like Sarbanes-Oxley and other accounting rules in place because of it. And I have in somewhere in my closet, I have the Enron leadership principles, and it's in a plexiglass, poster that's framed. And there were leadership principles. We just didn't even follow them. We didn't know what they were. They just sat on a plaque somewhere. And then went to Microsoft. And Microsoft kind of toyed with leadership principles here and there, and they've restarted them recently. Amazon had them in very strong, almost part of, very much part of their DNA and culture. And then there was this, GitHub had leadership principles. And they, just as I was leaving, they kind of bolstered those and said, we should use those. But it's interesting to see how, companies use those leadership principles to actually make decisions. That's what they're there for. They're there to make decisions. Whether a decision like, do we hire this person or not hire this person? Do we go into this product or we not go into this product? Do we, help this customer free of charge or we not do that? Like there's those are what, cause you to make those decisions. So I go all the way back to the leadership principles, because if HR wants to make like really fundamental changes with the businesses, you need those guiding principles to help you decide, hey, we're going to actually go do this. We're going to make the investment. We're going to take the time away from other things. We're going to hire these headcount to do this, or we're not. And so to make those decisions, you have to have some guiding principles that tell you how to make those decisions. So it's not just leadership principles, but the mission and the goal of the company, the what you have owed to the shareholders. All those things have to come into play. If you see alignment with that, you say, hey, one of our leadership principles, I'm just going to make one up, is think big, or one of our leadership principles is earns trust or trust by default or whatever it is. And this helps us get towards that.
So as IT and tech departments evolve with AI, how can HR play a more strategic role in supporting these teams, particularly upskilling talent and managing the cultural changes that come with AI integration?
It speaks to that company culture question. So what are the leadership principles of the company? What are the culture of the company? And then how do you foster that? So I think with HR and the business, if they're working together and they're intentional in figuring out, how do we reward people that demonstrate those leadership principles and demonstrate that culture, you'll get further faster. What is Drucker who said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, kind of reminds me of that quote.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we wrap up today's conversation, Jeremy, what would you suggest, or what are your thoughts or opinions or advice that you would want to share with the listeners today around AI and what you see coming?
My thinking is always, don't sit on the sidelines. My son's graduating this year from Washington State University, computer science graduate. He could sit there and just say, oh no, AI is here and I'll just wait on the sidelines and hope to see what happens and see where I have a place in it. Or you could be, a little bit more, leaning in or aggressive or thinking about like, where can I go in and add value? AI is not just happening magically by itself. And, at least not yet. We don't have AGI yet. So I think there's huge opportunity to connect business problems with, this new AI, function and ability that's out there. So I truly see, that as almost an opportunity for everybody, whether in really any roles, even outside of IT. If you can connect that AI capability with solving a real business problem, there's just massive opportunity there. And if you look at the startups that are out there right now, almost all of them are doing that, right? That's almost all of their pitches right now, even including the one that I'm involved in, connecting that AI capability with some problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah, so true. Well, this brings us to the end of today's insightful discussion. Jeremy, thank you for sharing your wealth of experience and offering such valuable perspective on how AI is transforming product development, leadership, and the evolving role of HR. Your insights into the future of AI-driven innovation have given us so much to think about. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you, Shveta. It was a fun conversation and look forward to chatting again in the future.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future episodes of TIDES. Thanks for tuning in.